This video is going to take us through how to go and alter one of the SQL DB status mirroring monitors. This is kind of a common question that I often see where a customer will have something that they need to make a slight tweak to an existing monitor. The monitor is almost doing everything they need it to do. Then when they go into overridable parameters, they realize this isn't something they can get at via an override. And it becomes the question of, well, how do you deal with that? Do you just go and unseal the entire NP, make the changes you need, and then reseal it up? The problem with that being, well, you've just broken compatibility with future versions. Or you could also go and write something completely from scratch on your own, kind of using that NP as a reference. But then there's kind of a third way, which is something that I really like doing, is to clone out only the code that you need, only the code that you care about for that single monitor that needs to be tweaked. Make your own separate NP. It's 99.99% product group, really well-written code. And then it's just that little tiny percentage that you're tweaking to make it do what you need. And this is kind of how to go through that process, how to go take an existing monitor, isolate the different elements in the MP that you need so it's going to work, so it's going to build in Visual Studio, and then be able to go and take that out and turn it into something useful. In the case of the SQL DB status mirroring monitors, an issue with this particular monitor is it's got 3 different states, but the thing that it's actually looking at, DB status, there can be multiple different results that come back when it runs it. So in this case, you have a lot of things lumped under the warning status. You have disconnected under critical, and then you have synchronized under healthy, and kind of a lot of things in between. One of the things that's in that warning state is a suspended database. And for one of my customers, for them, they kind of looked at this and said, well, we have disconnects all the time. They're brief, they happen, we might get an alert, but then it's going to resolve itself, the alert's going to go away. A disconnect for us is not necessarily critical. Suspended for us is absolutely critical, but this monitor has as a warning, we want to be able to go and flip-flop that behavior. And when you go into the overrides, what you're going to find is you actually can't do that. So we're going to get started by launching Visual Studio. We then want to say File New, and then Project from an existing management pack. We'll click Add. Then what we want to do is go in and go all the way back. I want to go to where we downloaded and installed that MP file too. So we've already downloaded the MPs in the first section. So we'll go System Center Management Packs, and we should have for Microsoft SQL Server. I'm going to grab the for SQL Server 2014. You could also do this. There's going to be a version for mirroring monitoring for 2008, one for 2012 as well. But we're going to do 2014 just for this example. So we want mirroring monitoring. We're going to click OK and open. Select what version we want. In this case, I don't care. It can just be a 2007 R2, but I'm going to change it to 2012 R2 just for me. Do next. Now I need to point it to these 2 files. Those are going to be in the same directory we were just in. And so it finds it automatically. We'll click Next again. If we want to be able to seal our MP, we can provide a key path. For right now, I'm not going to do that. Though certainly at any point during the project, we can do that later, and we will. We're going to give our solution a name. This is going to be 2012 Mirror Source MP. And then we're going to go and find, probably already done a couple iterations of this already. If we go into MP authoring, DB mirror status, and we'll go and select source. And I'm going to go and actually just make a new folder. Say OK. Next. At this point, we can click Finish. So we have all our references here. And then we also have our base MPX file here. can double click to be able to see what's going on. Normally I'd be working on a much larger screen. I'd also usually be working with 2 screens side by side minimum. So it's a little bit of a pain to be doing this in a single frame. But imagine normally the ideal situation is really to have a multi-screen setup or a very large screen where you can kind of collapse windows side by side. And so the first thing we want to do is we're going to go and look at the individual monitors and figure out which data source they're using. So I'm just for right now going to minimize the data sources. I'm going to minimize the unit monitor types. And this is a fairly small MP, so there's not too much going on. And then, so we have a mirroring database state monitor. I'm pretty sure that might be what we want, but I'm going to minimize just to look. We have a witness monitor. Nope, not what we want. Partner monitor. Nope. And database to group availability rollup, no. Configuration rollup, no. And notice just these plus minuses make life a lot easier. It makes it easier to kind of focus in on what you want to look at. Again, don't care about any of these, but I just want to go through every possible monitor. Okay, so we know that that first one that we were looking at was the one that we cared about. So what we want to do here is kind of work our way backwards. So the relevant code for this, you can see it's pretty simple what it's doing. We have a unit monitor, has various alert parameters that are part of it. You can see the good, neither good nor bad, and bad that we had before. You can see script name, kind of how it's working. This actually has the script as part of the monitor itself. But what we want to do is go over to here, so you can see its target, its parent monitor ID, and its type ID is going to give us some more information of what we need to copy, and it kind of does that nice little scroll thing when I go over there. But so we have a type ID of Microsoft.SQL Server 2014 mirroring scripted 3 state type. So we kind of want to go up one level from where we are now and find that. So here's our Microsoft SQL Server 2014 mirroring scripted 3 state type. You can see that this is an accessibility of internal. If these were public, we could basically go and have our own little custom monitor and just point to it in reference. Because this is internal, we're going to have to ultimately clone this set of monitors and code and associated logic out and make kind of our own version. Going to look through at everything with this, and you can see that, so this is of the type unit monitor type. This is referenced by the monitor that we saw below. And you don't really have to understand all of this, you just have to understand that they're linked together, and so we can kind of go from one step to the other, and then we're going to look here to see what data source this is linked to. So if we look at data source ID, we can see that this is linked to the Microsoft SQL Server 2014 scripted state provider. So if we go up to our data sources, we had 2 different ones. We had scripted state provider, and then we had the scripted state provider 2-level host TCP, or 2-level host TCP. So we don't care about that. We do care about this. And so we can see that this here, and we can see accessibility of this is also internal. So again, we have to clone all of this out. But this kind of gives us an idea of what we need to bring over. We have to bring over this data source that's right here. We have to bring over the unit monitor type with the scripted 3 state, which is right there, this top one. And then we also have to bring over this monitor. So what we want to do at this point is to start copying out those items. What I'm going to do here, since I don't have 2 screens, is I'm going to very quickly just make a separate XML file just so you can kind of see what we're doing at this level. So I'm not going and jumping around between Visual Studio quite yet, though I will need to have 2 different instances open. So we have a new XML file. We're not really going to use this. This is just going to be kind of a staging area. So what I can do is, I know that I need this data source right here, so I can collapse it. I can click to the left, which is going to let me copy all of it. I can go to my XML file here and bring this over. So you can see, here's our data source. This is just a standard XML file. We don't need to care about the formatting here, but the key is the entire data source in all of its decent number of lines. There you go, in all of its 648 lines. So we'll click minimize. enter. So we know we need that data source. We know we need this unit monitor. And it's just that first one. I had already gone and collapsed all the other ones. We'll grab that, bring that over here. And we're just really doing this for staging to make life easier so we know what we're looking at. We'll say minimize. And want to go back. We now want, I believe, this first one, yep, our database state monitor. And again, we're looking at these IDs to have a sense of what we need. And we all started working backwards by looking at the type ID, which then took us one step back of what we needed. And then we could continue up the chain to the data source. So we'll minimize this. We'll just copy this one section, bring it over, paste, and there's all the code for that. You can see as well, as we're scrolling down here, this is where it's actually making the XPath query logic, where it determines what's going to be synchronized, what's going to be synchronizing, what's going to be unsynchronized, pending failover, and what these will ultimately be, whether it's neither good nor bad, whether these are good expressions, etc. So this is where that happens. So you can see for here, the bad expression is disconnected. So this is why disconnect is critical. And if we go up a tiny bit, then neither good nor bad expressions is things like suspended, pending failover. And that's why you have certain values associated with those. But we can, for now, just go minimize. What we also need to take a look at is any display strings that might be relevant. So we can minimize monitors at this point. Presentation types, presentation. So there is an alert message that we're going to need. So we're going to ultimately have a string resource that we're going to need to bring over. Also going to have, so we can minimize the string resources for right now. And there's also going to be certain items that are going to be specific to our MP. So we don't need this 2-level host. Don't need that. Don't need that. Don't need that. This is our generic overall title for our MP. We can bring that over and we can tweak that ever so slightly if we want. But we do need is we need to bring over the scripted state provider display strings. And so there's quite a few. We need to go and make sure we have each of these. Also the scripted 3 state. We don't care about the scripted 2 state, so we're going to go and grab this right now. This little chunk. Correct. And we'll go back. And we'll make sure that there's nothing else that we need. So we don't need the 2 state. But we do need the database state monitor. So we need these display strings as well. You can see that this is actually populating the description of your alert message. So it's going and taking those alert parameters and bringing them in. So this is kind of the formatting for that. We can go and copy this and make sure that that was actually one we wanted. Yep, database state. Don't care about the witness state, so we grab this chunk here. Doesn't matter if I put a space here or not. Ultimately, it's not going to care. I'm doing it just to make it a little bit more logically organized when I'm looking at it. We don't need any of the witness state code, none of the partner state, none of the availability, group performance, witness. If we want to bring over any of the knowledge articles, we can bring that over as well. So database state, we'll bring that. And so you can see there's quite a few little items that we need to grab. And we may find that we left something behind, and we'll figure that out pretty quickly. when we try to build, and it will throw a fit. But for right now, we just want to kind of mine through and figure out what we're going to need, because it'll make our lives easier. And we're probably done at this point. Yep. So that was all we needed. So usually right now, what I will do, and again, often with multiple screens, but I will go and open a separate instance of Visual Studio. And then I'm going to say File New, and this will be a project, and this one's not going to be from an existing matching pack. So this is going to be our MP that we're just cloning in that one single monitor that we care about, all of the code that that monitor needs to run, and absolutely nothing else. And this will be mirroring MP. And we wait for the little green progress bar. There we go. So what you'll see is this by default is just going to have the generic references that Visual Studio gives us. So we need to quick pop over here. We can also see that I named this one incorrectly. I named it 2012 instead of 2014. I had 2012 on the brain. Can certainly leave that for now. It doesn't really make a difference for our purposes. But we do want to look at the references, and we can see that we do have a 2014 mirroring and a 2014 discovery. So we care about a couple of things. The first thing we want to do is actually just bring those in. So we'll go and say add a reference, and we'll browse, and we'll go to that directory where those get saved. Not there. And that will be program files. Well, 2014. And so we want to make sure we are bringing in the mirroring discovery piece. Now the other thing that we want to be careful to do is when we bring these over, and I'm just going to bring this down a little bit to make it easier to see for the moment. And we'll bring it back up actually. So you can see that the aliases that have been assigned are just kind of generic aliases that it's giving it out of box. So for mirroring discovery, we have an alias of ms2md. And if we look back at our MP over here, what you can see is that it's not using those same aliases. So if we look at mirroring discovery and we scroll down, or scroll up in this case, the alias it's giving it is SQL 2014 core. So we're going to have references in this code looking specifically for SQL 2014 core. If we go and try to use the existing alias that got added for our reference and then copy code over, we're going to get all sorts of errors. So I like to just normalize by copying exactly what was the original. I could do a replace all and handle things that way, use that same alias, but it's less chance of error if I leave things as close as possible. Same thing for the monitoring. It's SQL 2014 uses, which is different than my default alias. So I'm going to change that as well. That is a good start. Now from here, what we need to do is we're going to, because you can see we don't actually have an MPX file yet to work with in this second window. And again, you can see I'm just kind of hopping back and forth between our original source, which this is the pristine untouched MP that is what the product group has made, or at least this tab is. We did create our own little XML file, but this is the product group, the SQL product group's MP. We're just going to clone out what we need from it. This is going to be our new cloned out MP where we have everything. So first we copied over those aliases to bring them in. Now we need to add an MPX file, because if you note over here, by default, when we created our project, we got this MPX file that has all the code we care about. We need to then have some type of body to be able to work with. So we'll go and say add, new item. And we just want it to be an empty management pack fragment. What you name this does not matter at all. We can say clone MP fragment. And no importance. You want to name it obviously something that's logical, that makes sense, that you can work with, but no one really cares what it's going to be called if you're the only one using this MP. Certainly, in theory, you want to make your MPs so you could pass them to a coworker and they'd be able to edit it, work with it. We now have our empty management pack fragment there. So what we want to do is go back over to here to our source. And so you can see the beginning of this starts out with type definitions, module types, and then our data sources. So we have to mimic that here. We can't just take the code. So we copied over the data source, but if I just copy that straight over into this other MP, it's not going to understand it. So I have to go and follow the same structure. So first I'm going to go and say, well, and it auto-completes for me, so I didn't have to type the end part there. I'm going to do an enter. I then know that from there I want to have a module type. You can see it's also using some nice little IntelliSense for me, so I can just go and click that. And then the minute I put a closing bracket here, it's going to autocomplete again. Here, I can now go back and look and see, so we had type definitions, module type. I've already copied the data source that I need, so I'm going to go back to my little XML file that I created here, and I'm going to grab that data source. And then I'm going to go over to my other file. We can now minimize that. Delete there just to get rid of that space. Again, don't have to. It's going to let you get away with spacing there, but it can be nice to neaten it up as you go. So now we're done with the module types under type definitions. But next we do have a monitor type. So when we look at our XML file, we had copied over a unit monitor type. And actually that's so it looks like that copied twice when we look at this. So that's an error there on my part, so we'll remove that. And what we need to do is go back to unit monitor types and get our staging. So this is what we care about. We're going to bring that back to our little staging XML file just for organization. So you can see data source, unit monitor type, and then unit monitor. We want to look at this, so we need to have monitor types in brackets before we can paste in our unit monitor type. Have module types, we ended that. Now we're due types. And we'll go back over here, go back to our staging XML. Technically, you don't need to use the staging XML. Normally, if I have two screens, I'd just be going and copying straight from here, but it just can make it a little bit less confusing. Maybe it makes it more. And we'll paste that in. And again, we could leave this in its expanded form, but I don't really care to do that at the moment. And now we'll go back to our source. And so you can see that's the last of the monitor types that we need, and that's also the end of the type definitions. We've copied all the code that we need from there, so I'm just going to collapse type definitions altogether. Now we know that we need to focus on monitoring, and then there was a specific monitor under that. So first we need to add in the code for monitoring and monitors, just so it has that structure. So we go below type definitions. Now we go back, and we had our unit monitor, but we already copied it into our staging file, so we know just to go here. Jumping back again. And we'll minimize. And now we have our display strings, but we also have this string resource ID, so we need to look, we'll minimize monitoring. And so that string resources was presentation string resources. So we'll go and copy that over. So we need a presentation tag, and then now we can go back. We'll go to our staging, grab our specific string resource that we care about, the others, jump back over here. And then we can go back to this. So we're done with presentation. Now we need to get into language packs. I am going to copy this line just because I don't always as well. So we need to add a language packs and then a language pack ID and then display strings. And you can see that I spelled language packs wrong, so it's going to yell at me, as it should. Now it should like that. Go back to here. And we will grab our relevant code that we brought over. We're going to paste this in. See, that still does not like my end tag there. And we need to go back and figure out why it doesn't like that. So we have language packs, display strings, brought in our display string elements. What are we missing? So we need an end tag for language pack. Otherwise, it's going to be unhappy. Which is good to know. There we are. So at this point, we've effectively copied out all the code that we need in order to have our own separated version of just this single monitor with the database state monitor. So what we want to do is first try to build it and confirm that it can build to make sure that we didn't miss anything. And we did. So this is an invalid child element knowledge article. So we need to go and make it happy. And let's look at the actual structure. The nice thing is you don't have to memorize the structure. You can really just go back to your reference file to be able to understand what you're doing wrong, what's causing issues. So we saw our display strings, and then we ended display strings, and then we started knowledge articles. And so that's where our problem is. So we need to go here. I'll go to the end of our display strings. In this case, we want to end display strings. I'm gonna go down here because there's gonna be one there. Get back up. Make sure that everything's okay. So we need to start off the tag for this. Now we've made language pack unhappy again. Let's look at this structure. So display strings, knowledge articles, followed by not knowledge articles. And then an end tag. Now it should hopefully be happy. We're going to try building again. Save. Build failing again. So we want to look and see what's going on here. So it's checking mirroring discovery. It's not finding something that it wants. We need to go and modify and make sure we have the right and that might be why, actually. So I brought in mirroring discovery. I need to bring in the actual, just straight up SQL 2014 discovery. So that is probably our problem. And there we go. Right there. Bring this in, drop back over. Grab our SQL 2014 core. And now we're going to try building. And build failed. One less error. This is complaining about the 2014 mirroring monitoring. 2014 mirroring. And again, in both cases, what I needed was the discovery, because we're working on the small screen, kind of lost that point. So we want to go, and we don't actually need that. We do need to add a reference. And there's our mirroring discovery. A little bit of fun. And copy over mirroring. Just for our alias. Builds correctly. Save. We will click build. And this should build correctly. And we have a successful build. So what we have here is a completely isolated version of that single monitor in its own MP. Right now it functions the exact same way. So if you imported these side by side, you would get the same sets of alerts with one as the other. What we want to do is make our slight tweak change whereby when a disconnect happens, it's going to be a warning, and when suspended happens, we want it to be critical. To do that at this point, we just have to make one tiny little change, or at least I think it should be one, but we'll double check and make sure. So in our XPath query expressions, see where we're doing our synchronized is our good expression right here. So that's where we're going to get healthy from. And then good expression ends. So that's the end of our good expressions. Or neither good nor bad, which in this case is going to be warning. Synchronizing is going to be warning. Unsynchronized is also going to be warning. Pending failover warning. Suspended is warning. And that is the end of our neither good nor bad. So that's the end of our warnings. And now we're onto our bad expression of disconnected. So all that we need to do is copy disconnected here, take suspended, and put suspended here. And we'll double check and make sure that there's no other places that the unit monitor type doesn't reference that in any way and have any logic. And we click build. We have a successful build, and we now have our own version of that monitor where anything that is suspended is going to be critical, and anything that's disconnected will be warning along with any of the other warning level states. This is going to, basically what you would do in this case is any servers that you want to have that behavior on, you would go and enable this monitor, turn it on, and you would then have the default out-of-box SQL product group mirroring MP monitor for this, and you would just turn off that single monitor for any system that you turn this one on for. And then you have a fully functioning MP. What we might want to do with this too is if we go into monitors, and right now it's enabled as set to true, we might want to set this to false just so by default this one's going to be turned so you don't have an immediate conflict. Otherwise, someone's going to immediately have to start overriding this. So by setting this to false, this is going to save people some headaches. And we'll do one last build there. You could also go and properly seal this up if you wanted to. We'll go through in a later video how to go through that process, but this just gives you kind of the structure and how you work through dealing with a question like this one. Thank you.